Step 3. Made a decision to turn our wills and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Every man has a God. Every atheist, every Christian. For man acts with a purpose. He acts for an end. Now all the proximate ends man pursues are not for themselves, but for further ends, and these ends for still remote ends. For example, man goes to work for money. He wants money for some further purpose, and so on. Now, this process cannot go to infinity, or man's life would have no purpose. Therefore, man must have a final end, an ultimate purpose, which orders his entire life. In light of this final end, all men's actions are clarified as means to this end. It could be said that this final end governs and rules the life of a man. That ultimate governor of your life is your God. Once we raise the issue of a final end and what that is, selfishness becomes an issue. For the end of one's life can be found either internally or externally. Selfishness is nothing other than making yourself the purpose of your end of your own life and your actions. The issue of selfishness must be addressed to come to a deeper understanding of recovery, and in examining the futility of selfishness, we will come to a profound truth about the human person. Selfishness is psychologically primordial, meaning we are intrinsically selfish. Selfishness is not a problem of alcoholics only. Children are selfish and need to be disciplined and educated not to be. If you meet someone who is genuinely selfless, it is because of their own efforts and the efforts of their parents. They were not born that way. Why is selfishness such a temptation to man? I'm not sure I can adequately address this, but I think it has something to do with the causality and power. It has something to do with causality, with power. Remember, the efficient and final causes are reciprocal. Walking about is the cause of health, and health is the cause of walking about. Now, I am the origin of the motion in my life, so it is not such a stretch to think I am the purpose of all the motion of my life. Now, I have said, and I will repeat because of its importance, the ultimate end of man's life, the thing that we are hardwired to seek, is happiness. For everything we do for the sake of happiness, and we desire happiness for no further goal. The life of the drug addict is but a gross caricature of every man's search for happiness. But what is happiness and where is it to be found? Since I am the origin of my search for happiness, can the conclusion for my search be found within me? Can happiness be found in external goods, such as wealth, fame, glory, power? Happiness is man's supreme good and therefore cannot be found in evil men, but the previous goods can be found in evil men. Happiness must be self-sufficient, but the goods mentioned are not self-sufficient. We seek them for some further purpose. Happiness must completely satisfy, but in the attainment of these external goods, someone may lack other goods, such as wisdom or bodily health. Since happiness is the perfect good, it can contain no evil. But these external goods can come with evil. For example, one may obtain riches at the cost of some good in their life. Man pursues happiness by an interior principle. He is ordered to happiness by the natural law. Therefore, no external good can satisfy his desire for happiness. Can happiness exist in bodily pleasure? Since man pursues happiness from an internal principle and pleasure is found within, it seems that happiness is found in bodily pleasure. But this cannot be because the body exists for the sake of the soul, not the soul for the sake of the body. For example, the purpose of physical sight is for the sake of the intellect. The purpose of man's life cannot be found in the body. Now, the alcoholic has an ultimate purpose for which he pursues the above mentioned goods, and this is egoism. The ego of the alcoholic is his supreme good, and all his life revolves around this. The pursuit of fame, glory, and power and bodily pleasure are all for the sake of the ego. Now, the important question is whether happiness can be found in egoism. My happiness cannot be found within me because I am finite. And in the depths of my heart, I desire a universal good. My happiness cannot be found within me because I am finite. And in the depths of my heart, I desire a universal good. Because of the nature of my spiritual intellect that transcends matter, I can conceive of a universal good beyond all particular goods in the universe. This is a deep truth about human nature that affects the lives of every man, and especially the addict, that we desire absolute, perfect, boundless, unadulterated good that nothing else can satisfy. This is what I have heard many addicts describe as the God-shaped hole in the heart. Let us examine the previous paragraph to find out the truth about happiness. Happiness is man's supreme good. Happiness is self-sufficient. Happiness must completely satisfy a universal desire. Happiness is a perfect good. Happiness is found inside. Happiness is found in the operation of the intellect and the will, not in the body. Therefore, ultimately, happiness is found in God. Therefore, God must be the ultimate good that man pursues to find happiness. If man desires a universal good, his ultimate fulfillment must exist, or man is an absurd, pointless, and tragic creature. Now we can begin examining the third step, which establishes the final end, the supreme good, where happiness is to be found, which is God. In doing this, the addict also admits that they are not God. In using his freedom to pursue an end that is contrary to the natural law, the addict lost his freedom and became a slave, ultimately to himself. For slavery to drugs and alcohol are just a symptom of bondage to self. But in determining his end in congruence with the natural law, he begins to free himself. He also affects integrity with himself, which is central to the act of recovery. Indeed, all of recovery is found in genuine integrity. Integrity in internal order and unification. Integrity is internal order and unification of the various parts that make up man's psychology. The ultimate ordinance of the natural law is this: to love God more than self. Now, this love of God cannot be theoretical or intellectual, or else it would be incomplete. It must be concrete and explicit. It requires an investment. Love is defined as the gift of self. What I love, I give myself to. Love of God requires the gift of self. This is necessary because I have a stone. If I have a stone that needs to be sculpted and I don't have the skill of sculpting, I must relinquish that stone to another who has the skill. I must give to God out of love so he will heal me. In order to make God my supreme good and purpose of my life, I must make an investment of my will in my life. What does this mean? Practically, I have acknowledged the true end of my life, and I must determine the means to that end, which are steps 4 through 12. But, in my opinion, step 3 is more profound than that. What does my life consist of? Because I am a rational animal, there are parts of my life that I share with animals and parts that I do not. Because I am a rational animal, I have an emotional as well as an intellectual life. Now, in drug addiction, my emotional life is disordered. I desire the wrong things, and these desires dominate the other powers of my soul. Therefore, in order to recover, I must hand over my emotional life to God. In addiction, my intellectual life consists in misunderstanding of what is right and wrong, and confusion about my ultimate purpose. Therefore, in order to recover, I must hand over my intellectual life. The primary act of will is love, and as I have said, love is the foundation of my emotional life. Therefore, when I hand over my will, I am handing over my emotional life. Man is hardwired to certain ends by the natural law. Some of these ends are unique to men, and in that they involve the intellect. These ends are called intelligible human goods. For example, the pursuit of truth and beauty and integrity and marriage and friendship. But as I have said, none of these goods are sufficient of themselves. They must be ordered towards the supreme good. Further, in my pursuit of drugs, I destroy many of these goods, which is to say, I destroy my life. The pursuit of these goods would be impossible without the intellect, and our lives are made of the pursuit of these intelligible goods. When I say I am turning over my life to God, it means I am turning over my intelligible human goods over to Him. In other words, my intellectual life. Thus, when I hand over my intellectual and emotional life to God, I am handing over my whole soul, my soul. And it is through this ordering of my emotional intellectual life that I recover. What is the fundamental truth that all these acts of virtue in the third step revolve around? That I am not self-sufficient, that I am not God, therefore I need God. The decision to relinquish oneself, to invest your will and live necessarily involves fear. For investment involves risk, risk involves fear, and fear is proportionate to the degree of risk taken. My fear is different if I gamble $20 or if I go all in. In this third step, I am going all in. One reason for selfishness is safety. If I am the Lord of my own life, if I am God, there is no reason for risk, no need for fortitude. If I am not self-sufficient, then I am dependent. Things outside my power can act on my life. Then I am vulnerable. It is from this truth the addict flees from. The third step, acknowledging that I am not self-sufficient, is a profound and beautiful act of vulnerability before God. This is fortitude. The truth of human nature is this, that God is our efficient and final cause. That is to say, God is the origin and purpose of our lives. At a deep level, I am dependent. I need God. Indeed, my life rightly belongs to God. This is the truth the addict violates through the delusion of self-will. The addict has the delusion that he belongs to himself, that he needs only answer to himself. Where the addict belongs to himself, he claims certain rights. He has certain entitlement. This self-ownership and self-entitlement runs contrary to the nature because God is the cause of our being. The third step rectifies the delusion of self-will and is therefore an act of justice. What does the addict love? Drugs, certainly, but deeper than that, he loves himself. And now I have been saying the same truth in different words. Selfishness, self-will, making self the purpose of one's life, this is all self-love. Because I have already said love is the foundation of one's emotional life. Therefore, if self-love makes the object of one's emotion the ego, all that I love and desire and hope and fear all have reference to the ego in the one who loves himself. Therefore, to invest one's life in God runs counter to the selfish emotional life and orders the emotions to reason. In other words, it is an act of temperance. The virtue of prudence is presupposed in the previous acts of virtue. Prudence is the eye of every virtue, and no virtue is blind. It is through prudence that the other virtuous acts are based on reality. The recognition that I am not self-sufficient, that I am dependent on God, that I need God. This truth is an act of prudence and informs other virtuous acts. And because this act runs counter to the self-delusion of the addict, it rectifies the intellect and orders the powers of the soul. Act of prudence also involves the will. The decision to take the third step is an act of will and rectifies the will from selfishness.